There is something curious about the way we imagine God's work in our lives. We expect the heavens to split open, the mountains to tremble, or some unmistakable sign to descend before we believe that a new season has truly begun. Yet history, scripture, and the quiet testimony of countless faithful souls suggest another pattern altogether. God often chooses the ordinary to carry the extraordinary. He hides eternal purposes within common moments. A conversation, an unexpected message, a simple greeting, or a phone call may appear so ordinary that we dismiss it without another thought. But the greatest danger is not that God has stopped speaking. The greatest danger is that we have become so fascinated by dramatic miracles that we no longer recognize His quieter ones. If there is a warning to receive today, it is not one of fear but of readiness. Someone may indeed call. Someone may step into your path. Someone you have never met may carry words that become the beginning of an entirely different chapter of your life. Yet the value of that encounter will not be determined merely by who they are. It will be determined by the condition of your own heart. A closed heart can stand before an open door and never notice it. A distracted mind can hear wisdom and mistake it for ordinary conversation. We often pray for divine appointments while remaining spiritually asleep to the appointments God has already arranged. Think for a moment about the seeds planted beneath the earth. They spend weeks hidden in darkness before anyone notices the first green shoot pushing through the soil. During that hidden season, an observer might conclude that nothing is happening. Yet, beneath the surface, roots are stretching, strength is developing, and life is preparing itself for the day it becomes visible. God's work in relationships often follows this same rhythm. Long before two people meet, God may already be shaping each life independently. He teaches one person patience while teaching another humility. He removes pride from one heart while healing wounds in another. By the time they finally meet, they imagine the encounter has just begun, though heaven has been preparing it for years. This should humble us. We frequently assume that our lives are built only by the choices we consciously make. Yet God is constantly arranging circumstances beyond our sight. The person who encourages you tomorrow may have endured years of suffering, simply so they could speak hope into your present moment. The mentor who appears unexpectedly may have spent decades learning lessons that now become your inheritance in a single conversation. The friendship that changes your direction may begin with nothing more remarkable than a greeting. We measure beginnings by appearances. God measures them by purpose. But there is another truth that deserves careful attention. Not every opportunity that appears before you is meant for you. This is why discernment is more valuable than excitement. It is possible to mistake urgency for calling. It is possible to confuse charm with character. It is possible to welcome into your life voices that entertain you while quietly leading you away from wisdom. The warning, therefore, is not merely to expect someone new. The warning is to examine every new relationship with prayer, patience, and honesty. A wise soul does not reject people out of fear, nor embrace them out of loneliness. Instead, it asks whether this relationship bears the marks of truth, integrity, humility, and genuine love. Many of us carry invisible burdens from relationships that ended in disappointment. Broken trust has a peculiar way of convincing us that every future connection will eventually become another source of pain. Once betrayed, the heart often builds walls that appear to protect it, but gradually imprison it. We begin avoiding vulnerability because we confuse caution with wisdom. Yet there is an important difference between guarding your heart and closing it entirely. A locked garden keeps weeds out, but it also keeps flowers from entering. God never asks his children to become naive, but neither does he ask them to become permanently suspicious. Faith requires both wisdom and openness. Sometimes we ask God to send the right people while refusing to become the kind of person they would recognize. We pray for faithful friends while neglecting faithfulness ourselves. We long for honest companions while excusing our own dishonesty. We seek encouragement while withholding encouragement from others. The relationships God sends often require us to become ready before we become connected. Preparation is itself a form of blessing. Heaven is less concerned with giving you everything immediately than with ensuring you possess the character to receive it without destroying it. There is another illusion we must confront. We imagine that destiny always arrives through spectacular events. Yet consider how many lives have been transformed through simple acts of kindness. A teacher speaks one sentence that changes a student's future. A stranger offers encouragement during a season of despair. A brief conversation opens the door to years of purpose. These moments seem insignificant when they occur, yet looking backward, they have been the turning points by which an entire life is measured. Eternity often enters history disguised as ordinary time. If someone reaches out to you in the coming days, do not immediately assume that the significance lies in the call itself. Instead, pay attention to what God may be cultivating within you through the encounter. Perhaps he is teaching patience. Perhaps he is exposing pride. Perhaps he is reminding you that you are not meant to journey alone. Relationships are not merely gifts of companionship. They are classrooms in which character is shaped. Every meaningful connection reveals something about who we are and who we are becoming. The deepest friendships are rarely built upon convenience. They grow from shared truth, mutual sacrifice, forgiveness, and perseverance. Likewise, the relationships God establishes are not designed merely to make us comfortable. They are intended to make us holy. We often seek people who will affirm every desire we possess, while God sends people who lovingly challenge us to become better than we imagined possible. Such relationships are not always easy, but they are deeply valuable because they point us toward greater wisdom rather than greater comfort. There is also great comfort in remembering that no human relationship can replace the place that belongs to God alone. When we expect another person to satisfy every longing of the soul, disappointment becomes inevitable. Human beings are wonderful companions, but they make poor saviors. Only God can carry the weight of our deepest hopes. The healthiest relationships begin when two people meet, not as empty vessels demanding completion, but as souls already anchored in the love of their Creator. Then friendship becomes a gift instead of an idol. Love becomes generous instead of possessive. Trust becomes an expression of faith rather than fear. So if today you sense that a new chapter may be approaching, do not become consumed with guessing who will call or when they will appear. Become more concerned with the condition of your own spirit. Are you listening? Are you growing? Are you forgiving? Are you becoming the person God is shaping you to be? These questions matter far more than predicting tomorrow's events. The future belongs to God, but today's obedience belongs to you. The unexpected call, if it comes, may indeed become the beginning of something remarkable. Yet its true significance will not lie in the ringing of a telephone or the appearance of a new face. It will lie in the quiet realization that God has been working long before you noticed. He has been preparing roads you have not yet walked, conversations you have not yet heard, and relationships you have not yet imagined. Nothing is wasted in His hands. Every season of waiting, every lesson learned in solitude, every disappointment surrendered to Him can become part of the foundation upon which new blessings are built. Therefore, remain watchful, but do not become anxious. Remain hopeful, but do not become naive. Welcome people with kindness, yet test every influence with wisdom. Trust that God is able to weave together circumstances beyond your understanding. And remember that the greatest miracles often begin so quietly that they resemble ordinary life until years later, when you look back and realize that everything changed because you were willing to answer one unexpected call with a heart prepared by faith. There are seasons in every life when silence feels heavier than words. The phone grows quiet. Familiar faces slowly disappear. Invitations become fewer. Conversations that once filled our days gradually fade into memory, and we begin to wonder whether we have somehow been forgotten. It is during these lonely moments that the heart becomes vulnerable to a dangerous misunderstanding. We assume that every closed door is evidence of God's absence, when in reality it may be the very place where His greatest work is unfolding. Not every departure is a punishment. Not every ending is a tragedy. Sometimes God removes certain voices because they have already spoken all they were meant to say, and keeping them in our lives any longer would only delay the future He has prepared. One of the hardest lessons to accept is that not every relationship is designed to last forever. We naturally cling to familiarity because it feels safe. We prefer the known, even when it no longer helps us grow. There is comfort in old habits, familiar conversations, and predictable routines. Yet growth rarely occurs where comfort rules without challenge. A gardener who never prunes a tree may believe he is protecting it, but in truth, he is preventing it from becoming as healthy and fruitful as it could be. The branches that are removed are not always diseased. Some are simply preventing the tree from directing its strength toward greater fruitfulness. In much the same way, God sometimes allows certain relationships to fade, not because every person involved is evil, but because your next season requires room for something different. This truth is often misunderstood. When people leave our lives, we immediately search for someone to blame. We replay conversations in our minds, wondering what we should have said differently, or what mistake we must have made. Sometimes honest self-examination is necessary, for all of us have room to grow. Yet there are other moments when the ending has little to do with failure and everything to do with divine timing. Two travelers may walk together for many miles, encouraging one another along the journey, only to discover that the road eventually divides. Their companionship was real, valuable, and meaningful. But it was not intended to continue forever. To force them to remain together beyond the appointed season would only create frustration. Where there had once been peace, there is a temptation to chase every person who begins walking away. Pride whispers that if we try harder, speak louder, or sacrifice more of ourselves, we can preserve every relationship indefinitely. Yet love cannot be sustained through desperation. Genuine relationships flourish where there is mutual commitment, honesty, and shared purpose. If you must constantly abandon your convictions simply to keep someone near, then what remains is not true fellowship but quiet captivity. God never asks his children to trade truth for temporary acceptance. Loneliness, though painful, has often become the birthplace of remarkable transformation. Many people fear solitude because it removes distractions. In silence, we hear our own thoughts more clearly. We discover the fears we have hidden beneath constant activity. We confront wounds that conversations have temporarily covered. Solitude is uncomfortable precisely because it refuses to let us escape ourselves. Yet God frequently chooses these quiet places to reshape the human heart. Before many of his servants entered seasons of public influence, they first experienced seasons of hidden preparation. The wilderness has always been one of heaven's classrooms. It is within these lonely moments that we begin to recognize how easily human approval can become an idol. We may not consciously worship the opinions of others, yet we often measure our worth by their attention. A delayed reply feels like rejection. An unanswered message feels like abandonment. A fading friendship feels like evidence that we have somehow become less valuable. But your value has never depended upon the number of people who remain beside you. Human affection rises and falls like the tide. God's love does not. If your identity rests upon changing opinions, your peace will constantly disappear whenever people do. But if your identity is rooted in God's unchanging love, then even lonely seasons become bearable because they cannot steal the foundation beneath your feet. There is another reason God sometimes removes certain voices before introducing new ones. Every voice shapes the direction of your thoughts. The people around you influence your expectations, your habits, your beliefs, and even your understanding of what is possible. Spend enough time with those who constantly expect failure, and eventually your own courage begins to weaken. Walk continually among people who mock integrity, and faithfulness slowly begins to seem unnecessary. We become more like our companions than we often realize. This is why wisdom urges us to examine not merely whether relationships are enjoyable, but whether they are forming us into better people. The right relationships do not merely applaud your dreams. They refine them. They challenge selfish ambitions, expose hidden pride, encourage repentance when necessary, and celebrate genuine growth. Such people are precious because they value your soul more than your comfort. They are willing to speak difficult truths with kindness, rather than comforting lies with enthusiasm. Their encouragement is rooted in honesty instead of flattery. At first, this may seem demanding, but over time it becomes one of life's greatest blessings. Imagine attempting to climb a mountain while surrounded by people determined to remain in the valley. Every upward step becomes an invitation for criticism. They question your motives, laugh at your determination, and insist there is nothing worthwhile above. Eventually, you begin wondering whether they are right. Yet once you reach higher ground, your entire perspective changes. The horizon widens. The air grows clearer. What once seemed impossible becomes reality. Sometimes, the reason God separates you from familiar voices is because they cannot accompany you where He intends to lead you. This does not mean you should despise those who belong to another season of your life. Gratitude remains appropriate even when relationships change. Many people served an important purpose during earlier chapters of your journey. They offered encouragement when you desperately needed it. They walked beside you through difficult valleys. They shared joys and sorrows that will never be forgotten. Their contribution was real, yet gratitude does not require permanent attachment. We honor the past best by receiving its lessons while remaining willing to embrace the future. There is also wisdom in resisting the urge to rush into every new relationship simply because loneliness feels uncomfortable. An empty room tempts us to fill it with whatever is immediately available, but haste often creates greater sorrow than patience. The quiet season between relationships is not wasted time. It is an opportunity to develop discernment. During this period, you learn to distinguish genuine character from attractive appearances. You discover the difference between people who merely enjoy your company and those who genuinely care about your growth. Patience protects blessings that impatience would quickly surrender. Many people pray, "Lord, send me the right people," while quietly ignoring another prayer that is equally important. "Lord, make me the right person." Healthy relationships require healthy hearts. If bitterness still rules your spirit, every disagreement will reopen old wounds. If insecurity dominates your thoughts, every delay will appear as rejection. If pride remains unchallenged, correction will always feel like insult. God often prepares us internally before He changes our circumstances externally, because lasting blessings require lasting character. The remarkable truth is that God's timing often becomes visible only in hindsight. At the moment relationships begin fading, we feel only loss. Months or years later, we look back with new understanding. Had those familiar voices remained, we might never have discovered new opportunities, deeper faith, stronger character, or friendships that now seem indispensable. What once felt like abandonment reveals itself as preparation. What appeared to be emptiness becomes recognized as necessary space for something greater. Perhaps today, you find yourself standing in such a season. The conversations have grown fewer. The future seems uncertain. You wonder why people who once promised permanence have quietly disappeared. Do not assume that silence means God has stopped working. The silence may be His workshop. While you are waiting, He is shaping both you and the people He intends to bring into your life. He is teaching patience where there was once anxiety. He is strengthening faith where there was once dependence upon human approval. He is replacing fear with wisdom and loneliness with quiet confidence. When the right relationship finally arrives, you will notice something remarkable. You will no longer cling out of desperation, because your identity has already been secured in God. You will no longer compromise truth merely to avoid being alone, because solitude has taught you contentment. You will no longer confuse excitement with discernment because waiting has sharpened your spiritual vision. Instead, you will receive new relationships as gifts rather than necessities. You will appreciate them without making them your foundation. God removes the wrong voices not to leave you empty, but to prepare your heart for voices that will strengthen your purpose, deepen your faith, and encourage your calling. The silence between seasons is never meaningless. It is sacred preparation. Therefore, do not fear the relationships that fade when God is inviting you into something greater. Trust that the one who knows every chapter of your story also knows exactly who should walk beside you in each one. And when the right people finally arrive, you will recognize that every lonely season, every unanswered question, and every painful goodbye was quietly preparing you to receive them with wisdom, gratitude, and unwavering faith. A single conversation has the power to alter the direction of an entire life. Yet the conversation itself is rarely the greatest miracle. We often imagine that our future depends upon extraordinary events, dramatic opportunities, or unmistakable signs from heaven. We wait for the perfect moment, convinced that when God moves, everything will immediately become obvious, but life seldom unfolds in that way. More often, God places before us an opportunity that appears almost ordinary. It may come through a simple phone call, an unexpected invitation, a brief encounter with a stranger, or a relationship that begins with nothing more remarkable than a few honest words. The opportunity itself is only the doorway. What determines the future is whether we choose to walk through it with faith, wisdom, humility, and obedience. Many people spend their lives asking God to open doors while quietly refusing to step through the ones He has already opened. Fear disguises itself as caution. Pride disguises itself as independence. Doubt disguises itself as wisdom. We convince ourselves that waiting is always the safest choice, when in reality, there are moments when delay becomes another form of disobedience. There is a profound difference between patiently waiting for God's timing and endlessly postponing obedience because we are afraid of uncertainty. Faith has never required perfect certainty. It has always required trust in the one who sees what we cannot. Consider how often opportunities are missed because of assumptions. We assume we are too inexperienced to contribute anything valuable. We assume someone else is more qualified. We assume our failures have permanently disqualified us from meaningful purpose. These assumptions quietly become chains around the soul. Long before circumstances limit us, our own beliefs often do. Yet throughout life, we discover that God frequently chooses those who feel least prepared, precisely because they are willing to depend upon His strength rather than their own confidence. A humble heart remains teachable. A proud heart believes it has already learned enough. The future belongs far more often to the teachable than to the impressive. Suppose that tomorrow someone calls with an unexpected opportunity. Perhaps it is an invitation to serve, to reconcile, to begin a friendship, to accept guidance, or to participate in something larger than yourself. At first glance, the invitation may appear inconvenient. It may interrupt carefully arranged plans. It may require sacrifices that seem uncomfortable. It may demand courage that you do not yet believe you possess. The question is not merely, whether the opportunity appears attractive. The deeper question is whether you are willing to trust God beyond the boundaries of your own comfort. Comfort has an unusual way of convincing us that remaining where we are is safer than becoming who we were created to be. We settle into familiar routines because they ask little of us. They protect us from embarrassment, rejection, and failure. Yet they also protect us from growth. Every meaningful transformation requires leaving behind something familiar. A seed cannot become a tree while insisting upon remaining exactly as it is. It must surrender the form it once possessed before it can discover the life hidden within it. Likewise, every soul called into greater purpose must eventually release the illusion that security is found only in what is familiar. One reason new relationships matter so deeply is that God often uses people as instruments of transformation. Very few lives are changed in complete isolation. A mentor offers wisdom at precisely the right moment. A faithful friend speaks truth when everyone else offers convenience. A spouse, colleague, teacher, or companion encourages perseverance during seasons when giving up appears reasonable. These people do not merely improve our circumstances, they shape our character. They remind us of truths we had forgotten. They challenge habits that have quietly become destructive. They awaken gifts that had remained hidden beneath fear and hesitation. Yet none of these blessings can accomplish their purpose if our response remains governed by suspicion, pride, or selfishness. Every relationship eventually demands something from us. It asks us to forgive when forgiveness feels undeserved. It asks us to listen when we would rather defend ourselves. It asks us to remain faithful when convenience suggests walking away. Character is not formed during moments when everything feels easy. It is formed through countless ordinary decisions in which we choose humility over pride, patience over anger, generosity over selfishness, and truth over comfort. There is another danger that quietly threatens many promising beginnings. We often confuse emotional excitement with spiritual confirmation. A new relationship feels exhilarating simply because it is new. The novelty itself produces enthusiasm, and we mistake that emotion for wisdom. But emotions, while valuable, are temporary companions. They rise and fall according to circumstances. Wisdom, however, examines character rather than appearance. It asks whether a person's actions consistently reflect integrity. It looks beyond charm to faithfulness, beyond talent to humility, beyond words to a life that demonstrates sincerity. Lasting relationships are built upon qualities that remain even after excitement has faded. Likewise, our own response should not be governed by temporary feelings alone. There will be days when serving others feels inconvenient. There will be moments when misunderstanding creates disappointment. There will be seasons when progress appears painfully slow. If every decision depends entirely upon emotion, perseverance becomes impossible. Faithfulness grows strongest when it continues despite changing feelings. This is why commitment possesses such remarkable strength. It remains steady long after excitement has disappeared. Perhaps the greatest obstacle to receiving new relationships is the lingering shadow of old wounds. Betrayal teaches caution. Rejection encourages isolation. Disappointment whispers that opening the heart again is simply inviting another painful ending. These fears are understandable, yet they become dangerous when they begin determining every future decision. A heart permanently imprisoned by yesterday cannot fully receive today's blessings. Healing does not require forgetting the past. It requires refusing to allow the past to dictate every expectation of the future. Forgiveness plays a crucial role in this process. Many people imagine forgiveness as excusing harmful behavior, but genuine forgiveness is something different. It is the decision to stop allowing another person's actions to govern your own future. Bitterness chains us to yesterday. Forgiveness loosens those chains. It does not erase wisdom or remove appropriate boundaries, but it restores the freedom to love without constantly expecting betrayal. Only a free heart can fully embrace the relationships God intends to use for future growth. There is also profound wisdom in recognizing that every relationship carries responsibility. We often focus on what others should contribute to our lives while giving little attention to what we ourselves are called to offer. Faithful friendships require loyalty. Honest conversations require humility. Trust requires consistency. Encouragement requires generosity of spirit. The healthiest relationships are never built by one person endlessly giving while the other endlessly receiving. They flourish where mutual service becomes the shared foundation. Imagine two travelers crossing a difficult landscape. If each insists upon carrying only personal burdens while ignoring the other, both eventually become exhausted. But when each occasionally helps bear the other's load, the journey becomes lighter for both. This is the beauty of relationships rooted in genuine love. They transform individual struggles into shared perseverance. Such companionship reflects something deeply sacred because it reminds us that we were never created to walk life's journey entirely alone. Even so, every human relationship remains imperfect. People will misunderstand us despite their best intentions. They will sometimes disappoint us because they too are learning, growing, and struggling. If we demand perfection from others, loneliness becomes inevitable. Grace allows relationships to survive ordinary human weakness. It creates room for apology, reconciliation, and renewed trust. Without grace, every mistake becomes a reason to separate. With grace, difficulties become opportunities for deeper maturity. As you consider the possibility that someone new may soon enter your life, remember that your greatest responsibility is not predicting the future, but cultivating the kind of heart capable of receiving it. Become the person who listens carefully before speaking. Become the person whose promises can be trusted. Become the person who values integrity over popularity, kindness over recognition, patience over immediate gratification. These qualities prepare the soul for blessings that cannot be sustained by talent alone. Do not become obsessed with identifying the exact moment your future will begin. In truth, your future is already being shaped by today's decisions. Every act of obedience strengthens your character. Every choice to forgive loosens the grip of yesterday. Every moment of quiet faithfulness prepares you for opportunities still unseen. When the call finally comes, whether it arrives tomorrow or months from now, you will discover that the most important preparation did not happen during the conversation itself. It happened in the hidden places where God patiently formed your character while no one else was watching. If heaven is preparing a new relationship for your life, receive it with gratitude rather than possession, with discernment rather than suspicion, and with humility rather than pride. Do not ask merely, "What can this person do for me?" Ask instead, "How can I reflect the love, truth, faithfulness, and wisdom that God has been teaching me?" Relationships become transformative when both people seek not only to receive blessings, but also to become blessings. And should the long-awaited call finally arrive, remember this above all else. The miracle is not simply that someone reached out to you. The miracle is that God has been shaping your heart long before that moment, so you could respond with faith instead of fear, obedience instead of hesitation, and hope instead of doubt. For doors may open in a single moment, but it is the character formed over many quiet days that determines whether we are prepared to walk through them. The response you give today may become the testimony you share tomorrow, proving that God's greatest works are often accomplished, not through dramatic spectacles, but through ordinary acts of faithful obedience that quietly change the course of an entire life.